everyone. Good afternoon here in Glasgow, but it depends. Could be good morning where you are in the world, or good evening, or whatever. But it's lovely to have you all. This is the Q&A session for the Fantasy MLitt program. I presume that most of you will have watched the recording that myself and Dr. Will Tattersall prepared. Don't worry if not. We'll go through a number of things, and you can ask questions anyway. So I am Professor Dimitra Fimi. I'm Professor of Fantasy and Children's Literature at the University of Glasgow. I'm also one of the founding members of the Centre for Fantasy and the Fantastic, which is it's in its 6th year now. I still can't believe this, but there we are. Right, and we also have with us, and I'm very, very grateful for your presence here, 3 of our current students that are doing the Fantasy MLitt right now. So I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves, and then we'll get on to chatting. Shall we go, Chase? Would you like to go first?
Sure. Hi, I'm Chase. Like Dimitra said, I'm currently a student here. I'm currently doing my dissertation research on body modification and world building in fantasy video games.
Great. Nika?
Hi, everyone. I'm Nika. I'm also on the Fantasy MLitt program, and I'm currently working on my dissertation on the Hunger Games, mostly the surveillance and the difficulty engaged on it.
Great. And Percy?
Hi, I'm Percy. Also in the Fantasy MLitt, also working on a dissertation specifically focusing on cyberpunk and digital holograms as digital ghosts in Blade Runner and a couple other films.
Great, excellent. It's dissertation season at the moment, you must have realized by now. So most of the other coursework is done and people are focusing on their dissertation projects. Okay, so a little bit of housekeeping. So we're going to start with a few sort of general questions to our students to give you a sense of, the experience of the program, but please feel free to post questions as we go, and I think we're going to try and address them as they come up, but we'll also give ourselves a little bit of time at the end to go through and see if we've missed anything. Hopefully not. So yeah, feel free to ask away as you go, especially if something comes to mind and you might forget it later on. That's all good. Okay, so I'm going to again put our lovely students on the spot and ask them one by one to talk us through a bit about why they chose this program, maybe what undergraduate degree they came from, how did the connection come, and maybe a little bit about their previous experience on researching fantasy versus where they are now, I suppose, in the process. Shall we go the same order? I think that sort of makes sense. So Percy, would you like to start first?
Yeah, sure. I did my bachelor's at UMass Boston, focusing on English literature, film, and creative writing. And I chose this MLitt program specifically because it was the only one that existed. And I was trying to decide between going the film studies versus like the literature studies route. And I found this program like really flexible because of that. One of my undergrad professors also knew a couple people who taught in the Fantasy MLitt program. So it was a good fit in terms of like research interests as well for me as someone who likes to do stuff with like post-colonial studies and both cyberpunk and fantasy as genres as well. A lot of different reasons.
Excellent, thank you. I should have said we're going backwards rather than the same order as before. Sorry, Trace, I got you completely confused there. This is my brain going ahead of me. Nika, would you like to go next?
Sure. I also did my bachelor's in English literature in Iran. At the time, I didn't know I was going to pursue it in fantasy, but once everything was wrapped up, I figured this is the thing this is a field that I'm most interested in, and same as Percy, there's nowhere else that does it, and I feel like this place is doing such a good job, especially as it lets me choose my own adventure with it, choose my own classes and courses. It's amazing. That's why I chose it basically, but there's a lot of reasons. This is the main one, I would say.
Sure. Yeah, so the core course is what everybody does, but apart from that, then there's quite a wide choice in terms of options. We might speak a little bit about options afterwards. Yeah, thanks, Nika. And Chase?
Yeah, so I did my bachelor's in women's gender and sexuality studies at Stony Brook University in New York. I did a minor in English, and I actually did my undergrad dissertation on The Hobbit, and that kind of really sparked my love of researching fantasy. It's always been something I've really loved as like a hobby, a recreational thing. And when I found the program, I was just kind of really enamored with it. And like both Nika and Percy said, it's the only program in the world that's really doing this type of thing. And it's been really, really a great experience in terms of like research fit, and also just in terms of like the culture of the program and what we're allowed to do in terms of like how broad all of our interests kind of stem out from.
Excellent, excellent. I'm just seeing very quickly a question that I can very quickly answer about the length of the dissertation. That's 12 to 15,000 words. And again, it's very much in the mind of all of you at the moment because you're working on yours. So it's a substantial piece of work, right? It's like a little booklet at the end. There's a real moment of pride when you submit this. Okay, and then since we talked about options, and that's something we usually get questions about, as you will have seen in the presentation that Will and I prepared. Every student does Fantasy 1 and Fantasy 2, which are core courses, but apart from that, you've got, and also the research training course, that's also a core course. And everybody, of course, has to do a dissertation. But apart from those, then there are 2 options in semester 1, 3 options in semester 2, sorry. These are quite broad. There will always be a good selection of fantasy courses or fantasy related, fantasy adjacent, some science fiction, some gothic, some sort of early modern, etc., etc. But there's also options wider afield, including from across the college as well. So can I ask again, just so that people get a sense of the sorts of things, our students get to do, can I ask you, let's go the other way around now, starting with Chase. What options did you decide to take? And say a bit, maybe about 1 or 2 of them, if you fancy.
Yeah, of course. So in the first semester, I took, oh wow, totally blew my mind. I just took world building because we had the research training course and also Fantasy 1. And then this past semester, I took fantasy across media and children's literature with Dimitra, which was really, really fun. And I'm not just saying that because you're here. It's a really good class.
So all your options were fantasy-related options, world building, children's fantasy, and fantasy across media. Yeah, that's right. And that happens quite often. People, have come to specialize, and that's absolutely fine. Nika?
So my case is a bit different because before taking the program, I was torn between the Modernities course and program and the fantasy. At the end of the day, I definitely chose fantasy. I'm very happy with my decision. However, I took Modernities 1 and 2, which are the courses, the classes that the Modernities program people take, which is very different from the fantasy classes. I'm having a very vastly different experience with those 2 lanes, and I'm loving it, actually.
Good. Excellent. And then your second option in semester 2?
Is creative writing.
Creative writing, yeah, that's another popular one as well. We often get students who are interested in interested in writing fantasy, not just writing, but sometimes doing other creative things like we've had people creating their own games or scripts or whatever. So the creative writing option is always a one that a lot of our students tend to want to do it. Yeah, great. And Percy?
Yeah, similar to Chase, I was taking world building semester 1 and also fantasy across media semester 2. But I was also taking Tomorrow People, which was a science fiction course dealing with posthumanism and how do we conceive of like the concept of the human as we increasingly integrate technology into our daily lives. So a good spread between fantasy and science fiction, which was great for me. Yeah, I loved all of it. I have no favorites.
It's difficult, isn't it? It's really, really difficult. I mean, I teach a good few of them, and I still don't know. If you ask me which one's your favorite, I wouldn't be able to tell you. Okay, great. That's really, really helpful. I'm just trying to also think about other ones that tend to be pretty popular. The fantasy across media and children's fantasy tend to be always very, very much, very well subscribed. There's a whole course on fantasies of energy, which is looking at energy humanities and the ways that we imagine maybe structures of power around energy in speculative and fantasy writing. There's definitely courses in slightly sort of older periods like Victorian Victorian Literature Beyond the Human, or Early Modern Myth Making, which is also a popular one. And there's also Love, Death and Dragons, Medievalism and Fantasy. That's also one that a lot of our students take. World building, nearly all of you mentioned that. So that is another popular one, obviously. So there's quite a bit of scope. Yeah, Nika, you go for it.
I think you missed the very popular one, Materialize.
Oh, Materialize, yes.
I'm missing out.
So this is a course that is looking at books as objects, and is doing a lot of archival work as well. But yeah, we do have, Glasgow has a very strong special collections section in the library, and we try to use that as much as we can. So Chase, who did children's fantasy with me, we did a session in special collections looking at historical and rare children's fantasy books from the last few centuries, actually. So there's always, we're always trying to sort of, get opportunities to get our special collections involved, because they are pretty awesome. Okay, I'm just going to quickly run through and see if there's anything else that's coming up until this point. Thanks for adding all the links. Okay, so if we move on to maybe talk about, there's a question here for me that I'm just interested to know in terms of your experience, all three of you. Is there anything that really surprised you? I think Nika sort of started answering that when you were saying that the modernity courses were very different to fancy courses. Is there something that surprised you in any of your options, or in any of the main sort of courses that we did? Anything that was unexpected but maybe sort of opened up things for you in a way that you hadn't quite reckoned? Who'd like to go first? Chase, go for it.
Yeah, I think one of the things that surprised me was the frequency and the scheduling of classes. When I had seen that when I was first enrolling, I was a little bit worried about not having more than one class a week, but it's honestly really been an interesting schedule, and it's been something that I've grown to really enjoy. It's helped me learn to pace myself, and it's also kind of helped me build a lot of community with the other students. Like, a lot of us will meet up at coffee shops or in the library and end up having more discussions about the books and just kind of extending out our class discussions. So just overall, it was something I was wary of, but now it's something I really love.
It can be intense, but in a good way. Absolutely. Nika or Percy, any surprises? Who'd like to go next? Yeah, go on, Percy.
Yeah, I think I was really happy to feel like I got a lot of freedom to pursue different research projects and interests across different mediums. Like, I knew that there was a possibility to study film alongside literature, but in fantasy across media specifically, we did video games, we did comics, and musicals. And in terms of actually getting to choose topics for assignments and papers, my final for that class is on the fantasy of psychological warfare that the U.S. was deploying in the Vietnam War. So there's actually a lot of freedom that I got to experience, and just professors who kept saying, "Oh yeah, you can do that. Let's see how we can make this feasible," instead of saying "No, that doesn't sound like a good idea," or steering me in a different direction. So a lot of support there from the research side as well.
That's nice. That's nice to hear. I think that is actually a bit of a shock to the system for people coming from undergraduate degrees, where even in your last year you were prescribed essay questions, which does happen quite a lot. I suppose the Glasgow system already in your last year, you're creating your own sort of research questions. But it can be a bit daunting, but it's a great opportunity. You can suddenly sort of open up to all sorts of things that you hadn't considered, or suddenly realize, I could actually talk about this thing I've been wanting to talk about for a long time and never had the chance. Great. Nika, any surprises for you?
Sure, there were a lot of nice small surprises here and there for me, but I think the nicest surprise of them all was the fact that I got to meet so many nice people in the cohort as well as the staff. I was not expecting to be encountered with such supportive people. The vibes are so good, so great. I got to hang out with a lot of nice people, lovely people, and the staff is also very supportive in terms of accommodating different situations, different difficulties. It was just a very nice surprise for me there.
That's lovely to hear. We're doing our best. is my response to that. But yeah, I mean, for me, and I see this year after year. You know, the three of you have the experience of this particular cohort, but every year it never fails to amaze me and make me, you know, feel very gratified at how quickly Fantasy MLitt cohorts gel together and become a group. And you know, there's this incredible sense of, you know, support and peer support. And camaraderie, and that's really lovely to see. And I think a lot of that comes from a passionate interest in the topic and the fact that, as you were all saying before, there is no other program that does this sort of thing. So you have to be invested in, you know, you have to really want to do it to be here, and that makes a difference, I think, which is, it's lovely. It's really lovely to see every year. As I said, there's always a slight worry at the back of my mind that it might not happen, but it's never failed me. I don't think there'll ever be a case where it won't be like that. Okay, I'm just going to quickly see again what's happening with questions before I go on. Oh, we've got people from across the world, which is really nice. So thanks for joining us. Sure. So there was a question about children's books. I presume that's a question about what we cover on children's fantasy. Am I right to think that? I'll answer that, but if that's not what you're asking, please come back. Please come back to me. So on the Children's Fantasy course, we try to do a little bit of a chronology. So we start with sort of how children's literature began as a genre, which is not very, you know, it's not as old as other literary genres, I suppose. It's a field that develops from the 18th century and on. So we do a little bit of historical sort of overview, and that's where we do the special collection session, and we go all the way to the first golden age, you know, Victorian and Edwardian periods, and we do some Peter Pan then. And then after that, we sort of move thematically, really, and we look at big themes in children's fantasy. So we look at secondary worlds, we look at The Hobbit and Where the Wild Things Are, and then we're going to look at myth or time or children's Gothic. So there's a lot of texts that people will know, like, yeah, I don't know, it depends. I'm saying people will know, and I'm thinking, you know, people on this side of on our neck of the wood. But Tom's Midnight Garden is a pretty well-known text. So is Alan Garner's The Owl Service. But again, depending on where you are in the world, you might have never heard of those books at all. We do cover big franchises as well, like The Hunger Games. What did we do for Gothic this year? We did Orphans of the Tide, which is again a Scottish sort of fantasy, Scottish Gothic text, but we've done different ones. So the reading list does change a little bit from year to year, but you should be able to find that, to find last year's at least online and sort of get a sense. But the idea for this course is that we're not just looking at chapter books, we're also looking at picture books. Sometimes we might have a couple of examples of poetry, thinking about illustration as well. So it's a wider sort of thing. I hope that answered the question, but if for something else you were after, please ask again.
I will say really quickly on that, talking to like how you said people over here would know it. There were some books that, especially in the later half of the course, that I wasn't entirely familiar with, but that was one of, I think, my favorite parts of the course, was kind of being able to read that like British and Scottish children's literature and kind of get a feel for it. It was really cool.
That's good. That's great. There was a question about, I lost it. And oh, there you go. About the size of the cohort. The size of the cohort, I can't really answer it because it's how long is a piece of string. You know, it can be different in different years. But what I can be more specific about is the size of a seminar group. So in a seminar group, you will have 15 people tops. At exception, we've taken 16, but that's the absolute maximum. So in the teaching environment, that's the number of people we're looking at. This year's cohort was quite a big one. It was about 30 students. Previous years, it can be sort of low 20s up to sometimes over 30 as well. So that's around where it moves. But yeah, I won't know that until much later on in the process. But if you're thinking about the teaching experience, then we're looking at 15, usually 15 people in a group, sometimes less, but 16 absolute tops. So that's how that works. And the seminars are quite interactive. There's a lot of discussion. There's a lot of sort of specific extracts of texts that we're looking at, or specific sort of theories, etc. And then there was a question about Tolkien that I saw floating. Oh, there it is. Are there specific courses on Tolkien and his legendarium? I've been threatening for years that I'll write a course just just on Tolkien. But I can't clone myself. That's mostly the issue with that, because I'm also teaching across all sorts of other courses. So no, there's no specific course just on Tolkien. Tolkien comes up a lot in a number of them. So he comes up in Fantasy 1, he comes up on Children's Fantasy with The Hobbit, as I was saying before. He comes up quite a bit in the Medievalism and Fantasy course, Love, Death and Dragons, that our colleagues in philology run. So there's a lot of Tolkien in many different places, but not a one author course. We tend not to do one author courses. We tend to think more broadly in terms of themes, or in terms of subgenres, or in terms of time periods, because that gives a broader experience for students. I know that Tolkien can be, a topic on his own for obvious reasons. But yeah, that's how we deal with it. And then, oh, okay, that is a specific question there about the tutorial system. I'm not, like at Oxford or Trinity College Dublin, not quite, no. So there's no, so if I'm right here, if I'm right that you're thinking about the group of 2 or 3 people with a tutor and sort of bringing in written work, that is that is the old-fashioned sort of system that I think Oxford and Cambridge still use. No, we don't do that. We have, as I said, 15 to 16 people in class, and there will be presentations every week. So different students will present their work every week, and there will be a discussion based on the texts that we're looking at that particular week. There is an opportunity for office hours and seeing your tutor one-to-one. So I often have people coming in to discuss their research project or their essay topic, or a particularly interesting or difficult bit that came up in class. So that there is a weekly opportunity to pop into office hours. Do you want to, maybe that's a good place to maybe ask Chase, Nick or Percy to reflect a bit on the class experience, the sort of the interactive element of it, or the, how did that feel for you on the ground? Because I've been doing it for years, and sort of how I suppose you get, each of us have a slightly different teaching style as well, but you have experienced a lot more than just my teaching. So who'd like to have a go first?
I can start.
Thank you, Percy.
Yeah, I think the way that class was built around discussion was something that I really loved, because it felt like that exchange of ideas between like the entire class, like as peers. So I think that's one of the reasons that so many of us like grew close, is because we spent 2 hours locked in a room talking to each other about stuff that we were like equally passionate about. And as for like the one-on-one like talks with tutors as well, like that was really great for just getting to like expand like my thinking about like so many different things, but also just like that support was really like gratifying as well. But I think at the end of the day, I will always love a good like class discussion. Just like it's very non-hierarchical in that sense. It felt like there was a lot of great opportunity to just exist in that space.
Yeah, exactly. I'm glad this is coming through, because that's the that's the goal. That's the golden standard, really, is that we're all learning together. That the tutors are there to lead the discussion, or sort of take it the directions that it needs to go in terms of the teaching aims and all of that. But at the end of the day, we are all co-creating sort of the discussion there. That's lovely. Nika, yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I could go next. I also really like that about the classes. They're very interactive. Everyone is part of the class. We're actively trying to chip in and interact with each other, and it's so also supportive in a way that no one is forced to talk, but everyone just talks because they're very passionate about this niche thing that we're talking about today in the class. Yeah, it was really lovely, that aspect of it as well.
Great, thank you, Nika. Chase?
Yeah, I think adding on to what both Nika and Percy said, what was so interesting and fun was seeing everybody's undergrad backgrounds and research backgrounds kind of shining through. Like, we had so many people with different backgrounds in our classes, like theater, film. I was in gender studies. I have a friend who's in anthropology, and everyone would bring their own unique theoretical backgrounds. So there would be weeks where like secondary readings would highlight something like that, and there would be a person who could absolutely shine in a discussion, who like, because they had so much experience and they loved talking about it. And that was always so much fun to see from week to week. And yeah, it's such a great, like, community building thing to have all of these lectures or seminars, my bad. And it also kind of made going to office hours easier, I feel, because it didn't feel like going to talk to any of the tutors was like as scary, because we all sit in a discussion every week. So it felt a little more casual, which was great.
Yeah. That's really, really important, isn't it? We are trying not to be scary as much as we can. Oh, goodness. Yes. Okay, that's great. I had another think now. Just something crossed my mind, but of course it's gone out of it again because you're all talking about really interesting things. I'm wondering, there was a question before about housing, and I think, that is the sort of practical stuff that our teams at Glasgow will be able to address better. And I think Sia has very helpfully put in some links there. But I suppose that brings us to questions about the experience of the city or the experience of the campus, the sort of the physical environment of being in Glasgow. We are at the moment at Glasgow is at its best at the moment. We've got the sunshine, we've got, all of this rain that has fallen through the autumn and the winter. The trees have drunk it all up and they're going, and everything is blossoming. It's absolutely lovely. But this is me. This is like I'm out here in the countryside, looking, talking to you now from I'm at the beginning of the West Highland Way, which is like 15 minutes drive from Glasgow, from where we are at the university. But would you like to talk us through, the experience of being in the city and being on campus? It is a very atmospheric, sort of Gothic campus in many ways. But it's a pretty green city as well. Yeah, I'll shut up now. You tell us what you think. Who would like to go first? Nika, go for it.
One of the reasons I chose this place was the campus and the city itself, and Scotland and Scottish people and all of those things. And they did not let me down. None of those things let me down. They're better than I imagined it would be. The only thing I don't like about Glasgow is the wind. Apart from that, everything is just so good and magical. It's like a Ghibli movie all the time. The campus, the Victorian Gothic, it's just so good.
It's lovely. I feel lucky going to work every time. It is quite a privilege, that, isn't it? Yeah, Nika?
I'm so sorry. I just remembered that the day that we had a class on the turn of the screw and Gothic stuff, that was the only day that did not rain for our class. And Dimitra, you were like, I hope it rained, because it's always raining, but it's not raining now.
Not when
It's
we
very funny.
Usually the weather doesn't let me down during the Gothic week, but anyway, yeah, sure. Okay, Chase, you go for it.
Yeah, I mean, growing up in New York, I went into New York City a lot, so I felt pretty, coming to Glasgow, and specifically like I'm in the city center, Merchant City area, felt very familiar to me in that type of way. Actually, when we were all arriving, they were filming Spider-Man in Glasgow because it's so similar to New York City. So to me, especially city center felt a little bit like home, but I always pinch myself a little bit when the bus turns to like the road right by the university, because it really does just feel like going to an entirely different like Gothic world for like just a block. And it's really great. But the city has been so lovely and so accommodating as well to like learning new things and trying to figure out, what daily life is like. It's just been really great.
Excellent. Percy, go for it.
Yeah, I think similar to Chase, I grew up in Boston and grew up in a couple of different like really working class neighborhoods. And I think that's one of the reasons I gravitated towards Glasgow as a city is like just the city's history. One of my undergrad tutors literally said it was like the punk rock city of like Scotland. And so I think like that sort of identity and like sort of like ideologies are what really drew me to the city itself, besides like the program as well. I've had a great time here. I love a good punk show.
Good. Excellent. There's so much music going on as well. There's so much happening in terms of museums, exhibitions, literary events. And as I said, you're within 15 minutes drive from, starting on the West Highland Way and doing your climbing and hiking. If you're into that, there's a lot of opportunities. Yeah. I've had, as I said, I'm not that far away from campus, and I had deer in my garden this morning, which I had to chase away because they were going for my fruit trees. So you get nature as well, which is nice. The university has its resident peregrine falcons at the top of the tower. We've got a webcam now where you can see them. The chicks are going to hatch. Okay, there was a question about where is it now? I saw it and then I lost it again. Whether students, and I think that's taking us back to the options, right? Whether students on the Fantasy MLitt course are permitted to take courses outside of the department. And yes, I suppose that the three of you didn't. The three of you stuck to courses within English literature, if not just within fantasy, within English literature. But yeah, there is an opportunity to go further away at college level. So we've had people taking, I'm just trying to think of examples now. We've had people taking philosophy, for example, at the philosophy department. We've had people taking Japanese culture and animation, and especially if you're into manga and that sort of fantastic medium. We had people taking art history, archaeology, not so much. I think it's happened once in the past, but if you're interested in the sort of Celtic stuff, for example, archaeology might be useful there for you. So yeah, there is a wider spectrum there. Where it gets more difficult is outside the college. It's not completely impossible, but it is much more difficult to do. The college is huge, though. There's so many different departments and different courses out there. So yeah, do feel free to have a look through other departments as well within the College of Arts and Humanities, like as I said, history, film, theatre, philosophy, archaeology, Celtic and Gaelic, and I'm sure I'm forgetting comparative literature. I'm sure I'm forgetting half of my colleagues here, but there's so much going on. And then I saw one more. About registration. I can't answer this because I know there's changes happening at the moment. So whatever I tell you now might not be exactly like that by the time you arrive. Usually the registration on your core courses, as far as I understand, will be happening automatically, and then options will be opening slightly later in this new iteration. But it depends on, in some cases you would have access to that before arrival. It tends to be sort of late August. So yeah, keep an eye on the website, because as I said, the process is going through a slight change and streamlining to make things more user-friendly in terms of that. Academics aren't really involved in the registration. There's, that happens at a much higher level in terms of college, but we can answer questions or help you, if you're torn between two courses or thinking, will I be able to cope with this or whatever. There's a question also about the acceptance rate. Ooh, that's where my sense of what's the word, statistics and maths is not going to be much of help here. I can't answer the acceptance rate, I'm afraid, but I did say earlier on, yes, sorry, just in case you missed it, the cohort is usually somewhere in the low to mid 20s. I think the lowest we've had was 23, 24, all the way to 30 something. I think the highest cohort we had was 35 maybe. So that's around there. I think rates, even if I had the data in front of me, I wouldn't be able to give you an average, because I think it really does vary based on applications every year, and how many of those are appropriate, how many of those are at the level that they need to be, etc. So it tends to vary quite a bit. Your grades are really important for that, your personal statement, your references, all of those things. Great. Okay. Okay, so while we wait for any further questions, there was one more thing I had in mind, which is a question that comes up every time, and I'm wondering whether our live audience at the moment are afraid to ask, is assessment. So we started talking a little bit about creating your own topic for your essays, etc., etc. But there's also presentations. Would any of you like to chip in and talk a bit about how you felt the assessment worked, in terms of maybe workload or designing essay topics, or the presentation side? And some of you will have experienced slightly different assessments as well based on what course you took. So maybe on variety as well, if that's all right. Yeah, would like to have I can say something very briefly about, for example, my course on children's fantasy, which it has a slightly longer presentation with a written component to it. But where it's slightly different to other courses is that you can either do a traditional essay, critical essay, or you can do a piece of creative writing for children with a critical reflection. So there is choice within the course, which is unusual in terms of other courses around. Yeah, any reactions or comments on that, on assessments?
Yeah, I can start.
Go for it, Chase. Thank you.
Oh, bless you. So I think when it came to assessments, I mean, initially hearing about the presentations and the splitting of grades, it was usually just the three: the presentation, a midterm, and a final. It was a bit of a learning curve, as I think most grad programs will be. But once you kind of get those first grades and you kind of see what's going on and measure where you need to, push yourself a little more, where you're doing good, it really starts to you start to learn it, and it starts to get not easier, but you develop a process and it gets a little steadier, I think.
Yeah, that's a good point. The midterm is always a slightly shorter piece of work than the final, and its weighting in terms of your overall grade for the class is much lower, because the idea is that you try out some main ideas and main approaches, and then you take the feedback and you work on your final based on that. Yeah. Any more? Yeah, Percy, go for it.
Yeah, I think coming from English literature background, I was very used to having all of my assessments just be papers, and also just like 2 or 3 papers per semester. So I think coming to grad school, even like going into a different like teaching system, that was like easy for me to get used to. And I think as for like presentations, that's something I really enjoyed, because like one of the reasons I'm doing grad school is because I really want to go like into academia and do research. So I feel like that was good prep work for like teaching. And as for like feedback for assignments, I felt like a lot of that was really constructive and helpful, especially going from the midterm to the final, of working with like just building up my ideas and how I write as an academic as well, and gearing towards always polishing like work instead of like feedback that is meant more to get me a better grade versus meant to help me like in my future like career or so. Hopefully that makes sense.
Sure. Glad to hear that. Glad to hear this is working. Yes, Nika?
The same goes for me as well. I felt like there was a bit of a learning curve, as Chase mentioned, with the assessment, but the feedbacks were really good and really helpful and constructive. However, I wanted to talk a bit about the formats, the difference in formatting of my different classes that I have. For example, with modernities, we don't do a presentation. Instead, we do a longer piece at the end of the semester. So it's not that different. However, with creative writing, which is a seminar, which is a very different sort of thing, we're doing a much more complicated assessment for our finals. It's like comprised of different sections: reflective, critical feedback, our own piece. That one is just a lot more complicated, and especially because I didn't have time to learn that specific part. However, everyone was so supportive in helping us out into finding how we could do it and how everything is sorted out. And it was submitted yesterday for most people. Everyone seems to be happy about it. Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah, the creative writing work at Glasgow tends to be the traditional creative writing workshop format, where you will bring in your writing, there will be critique, you'll be sharing. It is quite, can be quite daunting if you haven't done it before, but because this is pitched at people who are taking other courses and they're taking creative writing often, for the first time or not, not that much before, as Nico was saying, there's support there to help you. But the idea is that it's not going to be simplified. You'll still get the creative writing experience like full-time creative writing students would do. So it's trying to have that balance between the two. Yeah, it's a very successful course there. Great. Okay. I'm just quickly going to see again if there's anything that I've missed. Yes, some really nice comments from our attendees. Thank you for all of those. Yep. Okay. The other thing that was in my mind, because we're quite close to the time of this, is GiftCon, which is our and generally, opportunities for things like events and seminars and invited speakers, that sort of thing, outside the curricula. So GiftCon, you will have seen from our presentation, is our annual fantasy conference. It's been going on for a good few years now. It switched to online during the COVID period. And we never went back to face-to-face, mostly because it now serves an international fantasy community, especially people from across the world, especially early career, postgraduate students and early career academics who might be in departments where nobody else is doing fantasy, and they have, there's no sort of opportunity to talk about their research or to get feedback on their research. So we've been thinking very long and hard about this, but the community's request is to keep it online so that we can facilitate that sort of international conversation. So it's called Glasgow International Fantasy Conversation. So that international point is really important to us. So that's coming up. Are any of you three presenting on GiftCon, or are you involved in? Yeah, Percy, do you want to talk about that bit of it?
Yeah, sure. So this specific paper I'm presenting is on Magic the Gathering and like trading card games broadly as like a narrative and world building technology. So that's how I sort of just snuck in the technology part for this year's theme. But I'm presenting and I'm also volunteering to deputy chair a couple sessions as well. And I'm really excited. There's a lot of really cool papers that I'm really excited to see, and I'm sad I'll get to miss a few because I'll be chairing other sessions. But it's going to be really fun. I'm excited.
Yeah. It's a very vibrant conference, and it's I just find it so energizing every year to see what people are doing, what kind of ideas they're developing. So often our Fantasy MLitt students will submit and will present their first paper in GiftCon. Or get some opportunity, like Percy was saying, of chairing, being part of the organizing committee, etc., etc. So there's a little bit of all of that sort of academic citizenship, I suppose, stuff that goes around the conference. This year we also have a big on-site sort of, on-campus international conference that's happening here in Glasgow. That's the first European conference on the Fantastic, which we're hosting. So it'll be later on in June, late June. And we're expecting scholars from all over the world to come, especially some, including some big names that, some of our students will have been studying in their courses. So there's a lot of all of that going on. I think most of you also attended seminars or workshops or talks by different authors, etc., that are not part of the curriculum, so they're not part of the stuff you have to do. But they're part of the wider experience, and you could use some of those for your RTC, I suppose, for your research training course reflection. Does anybody want to bring any particular highlights out of those? Maybe something you remembered in particular or enjoyed in particular?
Yeah.
Chase, yeah, go for it.
There was most recently an event from the Center for Fantasy and Fantastic about race in Disney and the ways that Disney kind of crafts whiteness. That was a really, really interesting talk. I was just frantically taking notes the entire time. And I also really enjoyed that the speaker kind of had us all do a bit of like a standing kind of discussion portion of it. That was really cool. Yeah. But there's like a ton of great events. I could probably lose breath listing them all.
That's the thing, there's too much going on, isn't there? At times, you feel like you have to curate your own program of events because there's so much going on in Glasgow. I still find that, after I've been here so many years, and I still, every September it's like being in a sweet shop. What am I going to do first this year, etc. Nika, go for it.
I just wanted to add on that I had to come up with a system with like a spreadsheet and a channel dedicated to events and keeping track of events and prioritizing and everything, because otherwise I would have been lost.
That's very organized, Nika. I might want to look into your system, actually. That's pretty good.
I'd love to share that.
Sure. Oh goodness. Okay. I'm going to, yeah, okay. So there was a question about jobs and where our students are heading. And obviously, I don't think I can ask you three to speak about this because you might have plans, but you're not there yet. We don't have a time traveling machine. But I can talk about where I know, mostly anecdotally, of where our students have gone. So what I usually say to our students is towards the end of their term here with us is to join with us on LinkedIn, and then I get a sense of where they are and what they're doing, and I share in their successes, etc., etc. There is also some more formal data that I can pull out, but for now I'm talking mostly in terms of my connection with our students, and I keep in touch with quite a few people after they're gone. So we've had people that have gone into teaching. We've had people that have gone into the GLAM section, which is galleries, museums, archives, etc., etc. So quite a few people have ended up with permanent jobs there. We've had a lot of people have gone into publishing, including editing. We also had very recently we had one of our graduates back to speak to us in a yet another conference about her experiences now being a junior agent for fantasy literature. So the publishing sector is one of our big destinations. We've had people who've gone into charities and charity work, public relations. I'm just trying to think now. What am I missing out? Oh, and of course, we had quite a few people who stayed on, who want to, as Percy was saying before, there's the aspiration to stay into academia. So a good proportion of our students every year apply for PhDs and stay with us to do their PhDs. So at the moment, I've got how many? I've got two PhD, well, I've got more than two PhD students, but those two who are finishing literally this June, they're submitting their PhDs, did our masters with us 4 or 5 years ago, and they're now nearly done with their PhDs, which is quite an amazing place to be. So all sorts of different rooms. I'm sure I'm forgetting some as well, because the thing about doing an English literature masters is that there are a lot of transferable skills and people can end up in all sorts of different careers. It's the critical thinking, it's the writing, all of these things that are important. Yeah, so I hope that gave you a little bit of a flavor. But as I said, I'm sure I'm forgetting bits. And then there was a question about access to societies. Right, yes. So all Fantasy MLitt students can be part of the SRC, which is the student body here in Glasgow, and they have full access to student societies. There's a huge array of them. There is also there's a fantasy society, there's a world building. So I'm just trying to think of the relevant ones, right? There's a world building one, there's one on comics, but there's also all sorts of things like sports and collecting and Rubik's cubes, and it's just infinite. The amount of different things that you're able to do is pretty enormous. There is a fair at the beginning of the academic year when people can walk around and have a look at the different stands and join where they want to. And as I said, some of our own students are involved quite heavily in some of those. There's also a journal which is run as part of the SRC on fantasy. That's some creative work, so journal that some of our older students are running, and it's continuing to run this year and will continue next year as well. I think there's good plans for all of this. So yeah, huge choice there. Are any of you involved in societies? Would any of you want to chip in on this? Yeah, Nika?
I don't think this counts as a society, but the Elsewhere journal,
Yeah.
I'm one of those. Yeah, it's very interesting. It's very lovely. I'm having so much fun. We just edited some stories.
Yeah, editing. See, that's it's not just writing your own creative work, but also editing and sort of commissioning work as well, isn't it? So it's being part of the process of publishing a creative writing journal. Yeah, that's great. That's great. Right. I don't think I've missed anything else. And if I have, Sia will tell me so, I'm pretty sure. I think we've more or less covered everything I was hoping to cover. Maybe shall we start sort of wrapping up, and maybe I'll ask one last question of our students, which is cheeky, but because I've sort of asked you to summarize everything really, but maybe a last word on why would you advise somebody to come to Glasgow and do fantasy? What would be your main highlight? the main reason why you would say that. Shall we have a go at that? What do you think? It's a tough question, I know, because I'm asking you to single out one thing. Nika, go for it.
As you said, it's very tough, but I think I made my mind up on getting to stimulate your brain in the most niche possible way and fit in with anyone else who wants to do that. It's just, I think, for me, why it's a good thing. It's a good decision.
Perfect. I need to write this down. That's great, Nika. Thank you. Percy, go for it.
Yeah, I think similar to that, like fantasy studies is such like a new field as well, that there's so much you could do because there's so much that like hasn't been done yet. And it's always good to like contribute, especially with such a great community, to like a new and growing field. So yeah, that's what I really loved about the program.
Right. Please.
Yeah, I would say even if you're a little worried, if your background isn't entirely English literature, as someone coming from gender studies, that was one of my big worries. And I, didn't see it at just a ton of places. You will be okay, and there will be people all along the way to help you out and help you develop the skills that you need to like absolutely flourish in this program. It is so great and so accommodating.
Oh, thank you, all three. That's really kind. It's really kind words. Thank you very much. And I'm really looking forward to welcoming any of you that will decide to apply or to take on an offer, etc., etc. I think I'm going to have a few last minutes to sort of post any last questions if you like. But just to remind you that Will and I are happy to also answer questions by email. And I know some of you have reached out already by email in the last few months. So if there's something you didn't, you suddenly thought, we suddenly finished this and you think 5 minutes later, oh, I should have asked about that, just drop us a line. That's part of our job to sort of answer these questions and help you make a decision. It's important that you make a decision that's right for you, right? So if there are stuff you're not sure about, do feel free to ask. And we'll try and guide you as best as I can, but as best as we can. But yeah, it has to be the course has to be right for you. Otherwise, there's it doesn't make sense. So feel free to ask anything that you think about after this via email. Otherwise, again, just reminding you that the presentation. The presentation on the course and going through some of those topics in a slightly more sort of focused way should still be available for everyone to watch. And just to thank our brilliant students for being here with me today and sharing their experience, which is, it comes from the actual people that are actually doing the course rather than just one of the tutors who's teaching some of the courses. So that's great. Quick question there about course catalogue. There is a course catalogue for English literature, and I'll see if we can get the link for that. But there is no college catalogue because it's impossible. It's just too big. So the way to look across the college is to go by department and then sort of look at the choices that are available there. So if what I'll do is I will put the link on. Let me just see if I can do this. I'm going to ask actually Sia to share this because I'm not sure how to do it. So this is a course catalogue by subject area that we're going to add a link there. And from there, you can look at different subject areas and see, thank you, Sia, and see under each subject what options there are. Remember that you're looking at level 5. These are the postgraduate courses because this catalogues will give you everything from undergraduate all the way to postgraduate. So you're looking at code names that start with a 5. And these are the postgraduate courses. Hope that answers the question. But yeah, I think at some point Glasgow tried to put all of the options in one document and it was just unwieldy and impossible to navigate. So that is probably the best way there. Okay, right. So I think this is us. As I said, do reach out at any other point if you need to. Thank you so much to Chase and to Nika and to Percy for being here. Nika, you want to say something? Go on.
Sorry, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think some people are taking courses from undergrad literature.
Oh yes, like the deep down, yes. So there is a possibility. I think once you can take one course during your program that could be a 4th year undergraduate, which for the Glasgow system that is also conceptually and sort of intellectually at master's level. But that does need a permission, and it can only be one per course. So if there's something in particular that you're very, very interested in, it has a 4 in front of it, do ask us about it. But yeah, that is a slight exception. Good point there, Nick. I forgot about that. Thank you. That's great. Okay, so thanks again so much to Chase and Nick and Percy. Thank you all of you for attending. And as I said, do reach out with any further questions. Hoping to welcome those of you who decide to join us in Glasgow in September. Thank you all. All right.